Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, today's ink was provided by the mysterious benefactor, Diamine Emerald. And this is a true emerald, like I've seen some inks sort of refer to themselves as emerald, but this is probably the closest I've seen in an ink so far. Yep. All the tests were done in these Hero 616s. This one with a pretty darn fine nib, and this one with a broader, wetter nib that I, of course, manipulated or altered, whatever you want to call it. I thought I'd compare it to some other inks. Now, here on this swatch, what I do is I use one of these. I guess it's called a paint knife. And I dip it in the ink and then I sort of mush it around. And here it came out kind of lighter than usual looking, but still, as you can see, it's a nice, genuine emerald. It has some shading. Thought I'd compare it to Diatramentis Scented Lily of the Valley, Diatramentis Scented Fir, and Diamine Umber. None of them are quite the same color, but I really like that color. Here's the chromatography, which this chromatography would lead you to believe that there's really not a lot of water resistance. You can kind of see that sort of like vague purplish circle down at the bottom where it was originally put, and then everything just flees, and it's light green, medium green, and then blue up at the top. And here's where I let it dry, and there's really not a lot of difference. You can see that the dot at the bottom is a bit darker, but that's about it. But paper test, top down density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. You can see, when you write with it, it's a much darker, richer green, and I am really enjoying it. I hope that comes through, just how rich this ink can be. And it's such an emerald, it's not like a forest green, it's not an army green, it's not like a spring grass green. This is a nice, deep emerald. The fine took 10 seconds to dry, the broad took 17. The flow on this ink is fairly wet. I'd say it's at least a 6.5 out of 10. Or no, I'd say it's a 6.5 out of 10, not at least. I'd say it's at least a 6. But yeah, as you can see, there's some decent shading. There's almost a bit of a halo effect up here, but God, isn't that a great color? But anyways, no bleed feather spread, no sheen. I said yet, because I started to get a feeling like maybe you could see some sheen with this ink. But, yeah. Did it make a mess? Yes, it did. But I feel like you can also see that there at the middle and the center, you can still see what used to be there. And actually, for once on camera, it's lighter than it is in person. If you had to, you could recover that. Would it be messy? Yes, it would. Now, next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter, and I've mentioned this, I think, before once or twice in a video, about how sometimes the last couple pages in, a notebook or, like the paper starts to develop like a poor quality, and this was one of those pages that was like at the back of the, those Rhodia pads, and its behavior was unusually poor. When I was using these pens with this ink on other Rhodia paper, it was just fine. It did very well, but on this sheet, for the testing, it did not as well as it usually does, but I thought I'd show it anyway. As you can see, there's some decent shading. It's a wonderful, rich color. Here you do see a bit of that halo effect. Fine took 9 seconds to dry. The broad took 16. God, such a lovely, rich color. So there's unusual bleed and mild feathering, but honestly, I'm having trouble finding the feathering. Yeah, actually, I kind of can't find it at all. But anyways, water test. Again, you can see what's at the middle of that. It's almost like a bluish purple thing going on. Didn't dye the page as much as I thought it would have. There's still some green remains, but yeah. Next is Tomoe River Paper, where it looks gorgeous. Hope that comes through. God, look at that green. Ah, lovely. Such an emerald. But, I mean, this paper does have, a weird way of making ink pool and, sort of changing how it dries. And so you really get this halo effect. I hope you'll see it around the scrubby just because it's easiest to see. Now, the broad wet nib did take 26 seconds to dry, and I feel like in that smear test you can see just how wet that is. The fine took 8. Man, look at that shading, right? Or, I mean, halo. It's gorgeous, right? Yeah. No bleed, no feather, no spread, of course, because this is Tomoe River. That's what it's known for. There is a bit of echo, I guess, if you're very sensitive to it, because this is a fairly dark green ink, especially on here. But God, it just looks gorgeous. But again, I mean, this is really not bad for Tomoe River. It loves to let just, ink just slide away when you add more water. But you could recover that if you had to. I mean, it's fairly clear and fairly there, so could be a heck of a lot worse. Next is 20-pound copier paper, where I feel like the ink really sort of retained some of its vibrancy, which is nice. But that's just about the only nice thing that happened with this ink on this paper. You can see all that intense feathering and just, oh, it's a mess. Fine took 2 seconds, the broad took 2.5. Oh, it's really bad. Yeah, it's a disaster. Water test was oddly good though. Kind of. The paper reacted really badly. But a lot of it's still there. It did feather and explode a bit. I almost feel like if you added even more water and like kept washing it off, more of that green would come off and you'd get sort of that clear purpley blue at the bottom. Interesting. Next is Mead Notebook Paper, where it was not great, but it could have been worse. The fine took 3 seconds, the broad took 4. You do get a good bit of feathering and some spread, and I mean, of course, in the broad nib, you're going to get a good bit of bleed, but the fine really didn't do too bad. Could have been a lot worse. I feel like the color is still somewhat bright. It is dulled a bit compared to the fancier papers, but it still retains some of that vibrancy. Water test, again, really not bad. And again, I almost feel like if you washed it off more, it would be clearer. Because like you see that dark underneath the green in there? Yeah, interesting. Next up is Modern Accurate Moleskine Notebook Paper, which means it is awful, it is terrible, I hate this paper. Anyways, yeah, so here it is in the broad nib, and you see that train wreck? Yeah, but here, look at the fine nib, and it's just fewer trains wrecking. That's just a mess. It's bad. And even for such absorbent paper, I was kind of surprised by how long it took to dry by, just how, because you put the ink on the paper and it would just go and start freaking out. Sorry for that sound effects. I know some people hate those. Anyways, fine, 3 seconds, broad 6, no shading. It's still kind of bright and still kind of dulled at the same time. Yeah, oh God, it's a disaster. I mean, even the fine was bleeding through, like, all over. I mean, of course, the broad just massacred this whole thing, but... And even the water test was pretty awful, although I think it's kind of cool that here, like, you could see the blue and the yellow, like, actually separating in the green. But, I mean, this would be hard to recover, because you can see, like, where even that dark stuff at the middle started to feather and explode, so... So, there you go. There's Diamine Emerald for your consideration. I really liked it. I wasn't expecting to. It is such a true emerald. It's gorgeous. It has nice shading. It's vibrant, but, it's more like a hearty vibrancy. It's not like ocular assault vibrant, because it still has some richness to it. It shades well. Not the most well-behaved on cheap paper, but it's a lovely green ink. So, yeah, for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.